Hey everybody, welcome back to the second section for chapter 20 on the Great War, World War One. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see notes that are going right along with this. Also, this section is entitled The Pressing Conflict, our second section of notes for this chapter, and this starts on page 452. So you can follow along in your book as we go through this. So let's talk about what was going on. Okay, some of the causes of World War One. An abbreviation that I've heard used a lot by history teachers is the word mania, and each letter stands for something. So militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination, spelling out mania, those little acrostic poems that we used to make like back in elementary school. That's what it reminds me of. So let's talk about militarism. We talked in the previous video about how this was building up a really strong military beyond what you would need for everyday occurrences, but kind of building things up with this idea that eventually you're going to be fighting a massive war. A, standing for alliances, which were the agreements made between nations to provide aid and protect one another. In the last set of notes, we were talking about how Germany was making alliances. Great Britain ended up making some alliances. And so we see these alliances come into play big time. Nationalism, taking excessive extreme pride in your country. We're all proud of where we're from. You know, every 4th of July, I'm out there with my red, white, and blue. Got the earrings and the flip flops with the American flags, and you know, I'm ready to support my country and show my patriotism. But nationalism of this extent is a whole different level. Okay? Really looking down and seeing people as inferior to yourself if they weren't born in the same country as you. Imperialism, where you're basically going in and taking over another country, their economy and their politics. And then we haven't talked about this assassination yet, but we'll get to that here in just a minute. All right, so for my visual learners, we have our two sides, and we're going to have a big boom here in just a second. So our Triple Alliance, you can see the flags there. We have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Okay, so they're part of the Triple Alliance, and they're going to be fighting against the Triple Entente with Great Britain, France, and Russia. You can see their flags. Or another visual, which this may be a little confusing for some of you if your brain isn't wired that way, but you got the blue blob up there with Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Germany, and then you got your red blob down there with Russia, France, and Great Britain, and we have Serbia and Bulgaria kind of there in the middle. So the spark that sets things off, that assassination, the A of Armenia, is when Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, you can see her seated there next to him, they go to visit Sarajevo in June of 1914. And they're traveling around in their convertible, and nothing good ever happens when you're a political leader in a convertible. Okay, we see that happen in the 1960s in the United States too. So if you're curious where in the world we're talking about, okay, Sarajevo is right down there, the little arrow pointing to it, so you can see kind of some of their neighbors, Austria, Hungary, you got Bulgaria, Romania down there, and so that part of the world. All right, so what happens? Okay, Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot by a Serbian nationalist. Okay, this guy was a member of a group called the Black Hand, and they believed that this area of Bosnia should belong to Serbia, and so they're making a statement. They had this planned out. Basically, they tried to assassinate Archduke earlier, and somebody else was hurt in the process. and these people were taken to the hospital, and so the Archduke was actually visiting, like on his way to visit the hospital, or leaving the hospital, I don't remember which, but in that process, somebody walked up to their convertible car there and shot the Archduke and basically started a war. All right, so just like when you're playing a game of dominoes, which I don't think I've played in years, but once one falls, they all start to fall. So Austria blamed Serbia for Ferdinand's death, and Austria declared war on Serbia. That leads to a couple different things. Germany had pledged their support for Austria-Hungary. Russia then pledges their support for Serbia. So you can see that we're starting to have kind of two different sides to things here. Okay. Then Germany declares war on Russia. Once that happens, France pledges their support for Russia because of their little alliance. Well, Germany doesn't like that, so Germany declares war on France. And then Germany decides to go attack France, and they invade Belgium on the way, thinking, well, we're going to take this shortcut. So once Great Britain hears about that, they're like, no, you can't do that. Don't mess with Belgium. We want our waffles. And so Great Britain declares war on Germany. So all of these things are just triggering the next domino to fall until we have a great big war on our hands that is a little bit of a surprise to some people. All right, so your book talks about war in the West and war in the East. So we'll kind of wrap up with that. So in the West, you got to remember Germany is fighting this war on two different sides. They have Russia in the East and France in the West. And so with the outbreak of war, Germany is in an interesting position. And basically, they had prepared for this situation. They knew this was coming several years before the war. A German general named Schlieffen had created a plan, and it became known as the Schlieffen Plan. And that put most of their forces in the West to go after France first. Okay? It would take Russia a lot longer, they thought anyway, to get ready for war, to mobilize and organize. And so they saw France as somebody they could pick off pretty easily. And so the Germans had planned to surprise the French by marching through Belgium. But Belgium basically refused. And the German generals then thought that they could, get to Paris pretty quickly, defeat France within 6 months. And that the German armies would be victorious and sent over then to the Eastern Front with Russia. Okay. So, however, when the Germans got to Paris, the French were ready for them. Okay. They had solidified positions with a long series of trenches. If I had a map right now, I'd show you that we have the English Channel up at the top of France, and we go all the way down to Switzerland. Okay, so they were prepared, and they were going to do their best to make sure that these Germans didn't take their capital. Over in the East, we have Russia, who gets her act together very quickly. Okay? Remember that the Germans thought it would take Russia quite some time to be ready to fight a war. And because of their miscalculations, Russia was able to get some early victories against the Austrians and the Germans at the Battle of Tannenberg and a couple others that your book talks about. Okay, so the German general Paul von Hindenburg defeated the Russians. Okay, and eventually captures over 200,000 prisoners and begins to push the Russian troops back toward Russia. They continued to fight for several more years. The Russians didn't really threaten the German borders ever again. They never quite made it as far as they had previously. During the war, though, Russian factories could not produce enough supplies. And they were hoping to get some from some of their allies, but German warships closed those ports, all those water routes into Russia. So Russia was really struggling. Britain at one point decides to get involved and attack, but were forced to withdraw pretty quickly. So why were we kind of in this stalemate here at this point of the war? Okay, first of all, what is a stalemate? Well, it's when neither side can really make a move to decisively win. Okay, there were so many new weapons that had been introduced, like machine guns, grenades, flamethrowers, mustard gas, all these different things that really changed the war and changed the way things were fought. Trench warfare, was that the solution? Some people thought so, but you would fight for long periods of time without gaining a whole lot of ground. Okay? Like I said here, millions die without really gaining a couple of feet of ground. So I don't know that trench warfare was really the solution that they were hoping for. So basically World War I then becomes a war of attrition, where one side tries to gradually wear the other side down. And that's not a fun thing to be a part of. So again, some of the new weapons that were used, machine guns, poison gas, submarines, airplanes, tanks. Okay, why did they have these weapons? Why now? Well, as we've talked about in previous chapters, the Industrial Revolution helped make these things possible. All right, a couple pictures to wrap things up. There's an example there of a trench. Okay, imagine living day to day, fighting in that type of environment. There's a little diagram where you can kind of see an example of what that would be like. We have no man's land up there at the top by kind of dividing them from whoever's in the next set of trenches that are firing back at them. There is a tank from World War I. Looks a little bit different than today's version. There's a mask. Obviously humans had them too, but I thought this was an interesting picture of a dog with his little gas mask there. Airplanes. Got a submarine popping up there. Machine guns, barbed wire. And that's where we're going to end. So there's one more section after this that we'll be getting to, but thank you for watching. Hope these videos are helpful as we go through the notes and continue on with this online learning business that hopefully will not last for the rest of the school year. That is my prayer. I really want to be back in the classroom with all of you instead of teaching in my guest bedroom / office / craft room / everything kind of room. So anyway, have an awesome day and we'll see you later. Bye.